We have Republican Congressman Issa from the great state of California, knows a thing or two about these outrageous benefits. He also serves as the ranking member on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which I think has jurisdiction over the tax cheats, if not other things. Now, Mr. Issa, before we begin, here's what Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said today about government jobs. Take a listen.
We've added 120,000 government jobs by borrowing money from our grandchildren to hire government workers today. It was also interesting to note that the average salary for government employees now is $70,000 a year. For private sector employees, it's $40,000 a year. So we have had an explosion of jobs in Washington, paid for by increasing the debt on our grandchildren. While everybody else is shedding jobs, the federal government is adding jobs.
And you know what, Mr. Issa, first of all, I'm glad to see that Leader McConnell is on this. We have been crusading on this now, this program, for the better part of the last 4 or 5 shows. We had young Jason Chaffetz on, last Wednesday or Thursday. He did a great job. I know you're part of this revolution. The thing that just blows me away, you know, the government unions, the SEIU and the AFL-CIO, I mean, it looks to me like they're going to do to the federal government and the taxpayer what their private sector union counterparts did to General Motors and Chrysler and U.S. Steel, and you know the story. I mean, that's got to be part of this, is it not?
Well, absolutely. Ever since John F. Kennedy signed the unionization order back in '62, the federal workforce has gone from being secure but behind the private sector to being equally or more secure and way in front in pay and benefits. And unfortunately, when they try to defend that the federal workforce is the same size as it was back then, Larry, what they're really saying is you downsize the military and the DOD civilians, you upside the rest. So it's not really a fair comparison, because if you take the military and the Cold War and you put it into a separate pail, they have shrunk. But government overall has increased, and that's the dirty little secret, is that the kind of government excesses at a time when every other industry has used computers and technology to downsize these kinds of tasks, we've actually not done it. And that's one of the tragedies. Plus, our contract workforce has grown, and that's one of the reasons the budget is so bloated.
And by the way, hats off to this USA Today reporter for doing the job. He did the comparables. We have some comparables. We'll put them up on the full screen just to take a quick look to see exactly how much the public sector makes over the private sector. Now, yeah, there's some. You know, janitors, 30,000 versus 24,000. Secretaries, 44 versus 33. Nurses, 74.5 versus 64. I don't see clergy up there. That's my favorite one. Government clergymen make, I don't know, 2 or 3 times what private sector clergymen make. We all should have gone into the priesthood for the federal government. But, Mr. Issa, there is some talk now. I want to ask you, Democrats and Republicans, possibly a congressional pay cut of 5% or something like $8,500. That's a start. It's a small start. What do you make of that?
Well, certainly it would be in line with the suffering of the private sector. But the truth is, what we should have done is we should have frozen or deferred all federal workforce increases, including our own, until we got back to some semblance of, quote, a balanced budget. We can't have these kinds of stimuluses actually increasing our own pay, increasing through the stimulus state and local workers' pay and benefits. Well, people are losing their jobs in the private sector, and that's what's happened under this administration. And it didn't start under this administration. The last administration did nothing to really rein in the growth of the government. They blamed the war. But the fact is, the supplementals allowed for a lot of growth that shouldn't have been allowed.
Is this pay cut idea going anyplace, sir?
I doubt it. You got to remember that to get us to just vote against our own pay increase is always an annual fight. To actually vote and lower our pay is unlikely, but it should happen. And if you were to go to outside sources and say, you know, we want you to send an up or down recommendation of what Congress is worth, I don't have any question that we would be on the downtrend in those recommendations big time.
All right, so let's just review the bidding. In the last 2 years of this terrible recession, we've had close to 100,000 new government jobs, point number 1. Number 2, their average compensation is running over 50% above their private sector counterparts. And number 3, Mr. Issa, I want to get to this in our last moments, House and Senate staffers are tax cheating their little keisters off, left and right. And Our own Hampton Pearson gave us backdated data, which shows the sewer is even worse. I thought it was only 5 or 10 million. Turns out it's $3 billion over time. Now, can you and Mr. Chaffetz and others, can you put him in jail? Can you prosecute him? Because this is the most outrageous of an incredibly outrageous overall story.
Larry, you're absolutely right. And in our committee, when Jason offered an amendment and we Republicans all backed him, Democrats actually completely shut down the markup of a bill when we insisted that tax cheats within the federal workforce, if they weren't making restitution, would be eligible to lose their job. Even though we had hardship carve-outs, everything, they wouldn't even do that. It was so biased in protecting the federal workforce, even when they're cheating. But remember, they do take a little bit of a lead. They start with Tim Geithner and Charlie Rangel, and they just keep coming down the workforce.
Well, I'll tell you this, sir. This is a Tea Party issue. This is an independence issue. This is a Democratic and Republican issue. This is a major election year issue. This is an absolute corrupt outrage coming out of Washington, D.C., and I hope you carry the ball on this. I hope everybody does. Congressman Darrell Issa, thank you very much for joining us.